Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Box Score and I am your host Hayat. Today, we're breaking down 10 college basketball matchups on February 21st, and this is one of those loaded slates where every single game has something. A matchup edge, a situational wrinkle, a momentum swing, an injury angle, something that makes you stop and think twice. I'm going to walk through these exactly how I do on camera and most importantly how these games could realistically unfold if the pressure moments hit the way I think they might. If you want to help me, hit that like and subscribe button. It will take 1 second of you but means world to the channel. This is pure analysis and opinion, no guarantees, no promises, just me reading the board and breaking down how these 10 games might play out if the data and the situations connect the way they're lining up right now. It's February 21st, conference races are tightening, desperation spots are real, and this is where edges start to show, so let's lock in and start connecting the dots. First game, I have Tennessee versus Vanderbilt. The lean here is Vanderbilt laying 1.5. Let me walk through why. So right now Vanderbilt laying 1.5, total set at 149.5, and I'm just sitting here thinking, that number feels short. My personal projected line is Vanderbilt laying 3.5, and honestly I could even see 3.5, maybe even 4.5. If this matchup plays out like I think it does, Vanderbilt at 1.5 feels like a discount. They're 12-2 straight up at home this season. Tennessee is 3-4 straight up on the road. That matters to me. What connects for me is the offensive gap. Vanderbilt is better on the offensive side of the ball. They turn over the ball way less than Tennessee. They hit their 3 ball at a higher rate. They hit their 2% ball at a higher rate. They're significantly better at the free throw line. Tennessee turns over the ball a ton and does not hit their free throws. Now yes, Tennessee has height and size advantage, and defensively according to KenPom Tennessee defense ranks 14th in the country while Vanderbilt defense ranks 19th in the country. So defensively they're both legit, maybe a slight edge to Tennessee, but it's not some massive separation. One path I see here is Vanderbilt's efficiency just stacking possessions while Tennessee wastes them with turnovers and missed free throws. Vanderbilt coming off a loss against Missouri, so if anything I expect focus. There's talk they may catch steam at home, and the line being described as too easy almost makes me uncomfortable, like is it wrong? But when I check the injury report, Miles, Collins, and Campbell are on the injury report. And they're backups. Starters are good to go. So if this matchup plays out like Vanderbilt protecting the ball and knocking down shots at home, I don't see how 1.5 is enough. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Vanderbilt laying 1.5. Let's move to next game, Cincinnati Bearcats versus Kansas Jayhawks. The lean here is Kansas laying 11.5, with a lean toward the under. Let me walk through why. Kansas laying 11.5, total set at 133.5, and anytime I see a total in the 130s I pause. Because usually with a total that low, laying a big number feels scary. But if this matchup plays out like Kansas dictating pace and Cincinnati struggling to score, that number makes sense. Kansas has a top 10 defense in the country according to KenPom. Cincinnati prides itself on defense, so I get why 133.5 is where it is. But Kansas has 2 guys damn near 7 foot in the paint, and Cincinnati on the road has been rough. They have 1 road win this season. That road win was against Kansas State last week. Outside of that, lost by 22 to Houston on the road. Lost by 14 to Arizona State on the road. Lost by 26 to Arizona on the road. Now you're walking into Allen Fieldhouse at 1 p.m. on a Saturday and that place is going to be rocking. Kansas lost at Iowa State, then beat Oklahoma State and blew out Oklahoma State. Before that Iowa State loss they were described as the hottest team in the country. Wins at Texas Tech, beat Arizona, beat Iowa State by 21. One path I see is Kansas separating late because Cincinnati just cannot keep up offensively for 2 halves. What connects for me is environment plus matchup plus Cincinnati's road history. And with that total at 133.5, I can absolutely see the under being live. Because I don't trust Cincinnati to score consistently against that top 10 defense. But the anchor for me is Kansas laying 11.5. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Kansas laying 11.5, with a lean toward the under. Here we have another game between St. John's versus Creighton. The lean here is Creighton plus the points. Let me walk through why. St. John's 21-5 on the year, 12-2 at home, coming off a 76-70 win over Marquette. Creighton 14-3 on the year, 9-18 against the number this season, coming off a 91-84 win over UConn where they were 15.5-point dogs and led wire to wire for the most part, even though UConn took multiple leads during the game. If this matchup plays out like Creighton's offense clicking the way it did against UConn, they're not going away quietly. In conference play they're first in 2-point shooting, third in 3-point shooting, shooting 76% from the foul line, and they're good at holding teams off the foul line. That matters because a lot of St. John's points have come from the foul line in conference play. St. John's has a talented roster for Rick Pitino and they've been solid in conference play, but what connects for me is stylistic tension. If Creighton limits foul shots and forces St. John's to score over the top, now you're asking for efficiency. Creighton is described as alive. They have little to no margin for error, and this is the last real big game before conference tournament with DePaul, Providence, and Butler left. One path I see is urgency. Last year at St. John's Creighton snuck in the back door and covered. So if this game tightens late, I want those points. If St. John's wins, fine, but I think Creighton hangs around because offensively they can score at multiple levels and they've already shown against UConn as 15.5-point dogs they can handle this type of stage. So yeah, I'm taking Creighton plus the points, and that's why the lean sticks at Creighton plus the points. Next game we have Virginia versus Miami, ACC. Okay, the lean here is Virginia to win and cover at home. Let me walk through why. So I'm looking at Virginia Cavaliers sitting at 23-3 on the year, 11-2 in conference play, and they're coming off a 94-68 win over Georgia Tech on the road. And that matters to me because that's not some grind-it-out 61-57 kind of Virginia win, that's 94-68 on the road, that's rhythm, that's confidence, that's shots falling. On the other side you've got Miami Hurricanes at 21-5 this year, 10-3 in conference, they just beat Virginia Tech 67-66, second straight 1-point win, and the largest lead on either side versus Virginia Tech was 7 points. That detail sticks with me, 7 points was the largest lead, the game was never really out of reach, Miami had to claw back, Virginia Tech led for a large portion of the game, Virginia Tech led for a good chunk of the game. So when I think about game flow, one path I see here is if Miami keeps playing these tight, one-possession games where the largest lead is 7 points and you're constantly clawing back, eventually that margin runs out on the road against a team that's 23-3 and 11-2 in conference. And stylistically, this is where it connects for me. Virginia in ACC play is second in three-point shot rate on offense. They're the third most point-reliant team on three-pointers in the ACC. Almost 39% of their points come from three-point range. So almost 39% of their points come from three-point range, that's a massive chunk of their identity. Now flip it. Miami shoots the fewest threes in the ACC. They rely on threes the fewest in the ACC. Almost 60% of Miami's points come inside the perimeter. They get to the free throw line at a high rate. So we've got a complete philosophical clash here. Virginia spacing you, almost 39% of their points from three-point range. Miami living inside, almost 60% of their points inside the perimeter, getting to the free throw line at a high rate. Now here's the thing, Virginia defense is best in the conference at defending the perimeter and best in the conference at defending inside the perimeter from two-point range. They stack it inside. So if Miami wants to score almost 60% of their points inside the perimeter and get to the free throw line at a high rate, they're running straight into a defense that's best in the conference at defending inside the perimeter from two-point range and also best in the conference at defending the perimeter. So if this matchup plays out like Miami needing to live at the rim and claw back again because they're down 7 or they're down 6, I just don't see the same margin for error. Especially when Virginia is second in three-point shot rate on offense and almost 39% of their points come from three-point range. If those threes are falling at home, after a 94-68 win over Georgia Tech on the road, that avalanche can build fast. And I keep circling back to Miami's recent flow. NC State game, Wolfpack collapsed down the stretch. Virginia Tech led for a large portion of the game. Virginia Tech led for a good chunk of the game. Largest lead was 7 points. Game was never really out of reach. Miami had to claw back. That's 2 straight 1-point wins. That's living on the edge. And now you're going into a spot against a 23-3 team, 11-2 in conference play, that just won 94-68 on the road. If this becomes a half-court execution game, Virginia stacks it inside defensively and is best in the conference at defending the perimeter and inside the perimeter from 2-point range. Where does Miami separate? What connects for me is profile versus profile. Virginia's almost 39% of their points from 3-point range versus Miami shooting the fewest threes in the ACC. Virginia's defense best in the conference at defending inside the perimeter from 2-point range versus Miami getting almost 60% of their points inside the perimeter. If that math holds, and if Miami doesn't get a whistle-heavy game at the free throw line at a high rate, I see the path where Virginia controls tempo and margin. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Virginia to win and cover at home. Next here we go with game of the day, Michigan versus Duke. Okay, the lean here is Duke plus 2.5. Let me walk through why. We're at Capital One Arena, neutral site, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of wish it was at Cameron Indoor, because that would shift this entire conversation, but it's not, it's neutral. Michigan laying 2.5 points. Total, 148.5. I wanted Duke catching over a bucket, over 2 points. Spread is 2.5. Would have preferred one more point. But I'm taking Duke plus 2.5. Over a bucket, plus a 2.5. This is number 1 versus number 2. Michigan considered best team in the country. Duke right behind them. And when I step back, I think this game should be a pickup. I think it's a 50-50 game. I think it's a coin flip. I think it could come down to the last shot. If it's a coin flip, and I'm getting plus 2.5, over a bucket, that's where the value conversation starts for me. Now Michigan is coming off a game against Purdue. Big Ten is no joke. Michigan went through a gauntlet in conference play. Michigan State, Nebraska, Indiana, West Coast road trips, Purdue in last game. That's a gauntlet. That's physical. That's emotional. That's travel. And Michigan has won me a lot of money this season. I was on Michigan in last game versus Purdue. I respect them. They're considered best team in the country for a reason. But Duke, even with that loss against UNCC, they played Louisville twice and blew them out. ACC is described as weaker. Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, Wake Forest. So I get the perception gap. Michigan's gauntlet versus Duke in a weaker ACC with Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, Wake Forest. But perception isn't always price, and I'm looking at 2.5 on a neutral, and I think it's a coin flip. Cameron Boozer expected to be best player on the court. That matters in a 148.5 total environment. If the total is 148.5, we're talking possessions, we're talking scoring swings, we're talking late game shot making. Duke guard play noted as difference maker. Duke size noted as advantage. So if this matchup plays out like a half-court chess match late and it comes down to 1 or 2 possessions, having the best player on the court in Cameron Boozer, having Duke guard play as a difference maker, and Duke size as advantage, that's how you steal a neutral site game. And again, I keep going back to the number. Michigan laying 2.5 points. Total, 148.5. I wanted Duke catching over a bucket, over 2 points. Spread is 2.5. Would have preferred one more point. But I'm getting over a bucket. I'm getting plus a 2.5 in what I think is a 50-50 game, a pickup, a coin flip that could come down to the last shot. One path I see here is Michigan's gauntlet sharpens them and they win by 3 or 4, sure, that's possible. But another path is that the emotional and physical toll of Michigan State, Nebraska, Indiana, West Coast road trips, Purdue in last game catches up just enough in a neutral site environment at Capital One Arena. And if it's late, tied, under a minute, and I've got Duke plus 2.5, I like sitting on that side. I'm not ignoring that Michigan has won me a lot of money this season. I was on Michigan in last game versus Purdue. But I'm always looking for value, and getting over a bucket with Duke is seen as decent value to me. If it's a coin flip, I want the plus side. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Duke plus 2.5. Quick pause, if you've got an even one lean out of these 10 games that made you think differently, hit the like button right now. Seriously, it tells me these full slate breakdowns are worth the deep dive. And if you're rocking with the way I'm walking through the matchups, no fluff, just raw analysis, hit that subscribe button. It takes a second for you, but it means everything for the channel and helps me keep grinding through these full February slates. Next game we have Florida versus Ole Miss. Okay, the lean here is Florida laying 12 points. Let me walk through why. So I'm staring at Florida laying 12 points, total sitting at 148.5, and I can't ignore that Florida versus Kentucky spread was 12.5. That number matters to me because it gives context. Florida just faced Kentucky with a spread of 12.5, and they won versus Kentucky by 9. They didn't cover the 12.5, but they won by 9, and that tells me the market already respects them at that tier. Now here we are, Florida laying 12 points against Ole Miss, and I start thinking, if this matchup plays out like Florida's recent road dominance, is 12 actually enough? Let's just line it up. Florida considered best team in the SEC. Favorite money-making team in conference play. That's not fluff, that's perception built off results. And their road results jump off the page. One at Athens by 20. One at Texas A&M by 19. One at South Carolina 95-48. One at Norman, Oklahoma by damn near 20. I mean, that's not squeaking by. That's not surviving. That's walking into hostile environments and winning by 19, by 20, by 19 again, by 95-48 on the road. If this matchup plays out like those road games, 12 starts to feel short. Now I can't ignore the recent betting results because they're part of the flow. 1 versus Kentucky by 9, spread was 12.5. Florida team total over versus South Carolina. 1 by 14, scored 76 points. Back-to-back losses in betting results. So there's been some turbulence against the number, even if the scoreboard says they're handling business. One path I see here is people hesitating because they remember the 12.5 versus Kentucky and the 9-point win. But then I zoom out and I see the larger SEC body of work and the road dominance. Now flip to Ole Miss. Last win, January 17 vs Mississippi State. Lost to Mississippi State at home on February 14. Lost that game by 12 points. They were 3.5-point favorites in that game. That one right there, that's a red flag. You're 3.5-point favorites at home and you lose by 12 points. That's not variance. That's getting punched. And it says getting blown out in multiple games. Getting blown out to questionable teams. If this matchup plays out like those recent Ole Miss games where they're not just losing but getting blown out to questionable teams, I don't know how they hang inside 12 against the best team in the SEC. And I keep coming back to that identity piece. Florida considered best team in the SEC. Favorite money-making team in conference play. Road wins by 20, by 19, by 95-48, by damn near 20. Ole Miss losing by 12 at home is 3.5-point favorites. Getting blown out in multiple games. Getting blown out to questionable teams. If Florida controls tempo early, stretches the margin to 8, to 10, to 14, does Ole Miss have the offensive consistency to claw back? I'm not seeing that recent evidence. The total is 148.5, which implies pace and scoring. If Florida approaches that 76 points again like they did when they won by 14 and scored 76 points, or if they explode like 95-48 on the road, that 12-point margin can get cleared quickly. What connects for me is profile versus trajectory. Florida trending as best team in the SEC, Ole Miss trending with losses since January 17 vs Mississippi State and a February 14 home loss by 12 as 3.5-point favorites. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Florida laying 12 points. Let's roll into next one, LSU versus Alabama. Okay, the lean here is Alabama laying the points. Let me walk through why. LSU lost to Texas 88-85. Record, 14-2 on the year, 2-11 in conference play. That split is wild, 14-2 overall but 2-11 in conference play. They've got a win over SMU in non-conference. Win over Missouri at home. Win over South Carolina. And that SMU win was lone non-conference win versus team inside KenPom top 100. So when I'm thinking about LSU's resume, I see that 14-2 and I have to immediately filter it through 2-11 in conference play and that the SMU win was lone non-conference win versus team inside KenPom top 100. Now Alabama is 19-7 on the year, 9-4 in conference. They just beat Arkansas in double overtime 117-115. Quick turnaround. less than 72 hours. That's the first thing that pops. Double overtime 117 to 115, less than 72 hours. If this matchup plays out like Alabama is gassed from that 117 to 115 double overtime game, maybe there's a window. But then I look at the statistical profile. Alabama plays at a fast pace. Shoots the most threes in the SEC. Most three-point dependent team in the SEC. Shooting just under 36% from three. Now stack that against LSU allowing almost 39% from three-point range. Ranked 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in three-point defense. So Alabama shoots the most threes in the SEC, is the most three-point dependent team in the SEC, shooting just under 36% from three, and LSU allows almost 39% from three-point range and is ranked 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in three-point defense. That's the matchup right there. If Alabama gets volume and LSU continues allowing almost 39% from three-point range, this can snowball fast. And LSU offense has not been very good. That's the other piece. If Alabama defense described as fairly solid and LSU offense has not been very good, where does LSU generate consistent scoring to keep pace with a team that just put up 117 to 115 in double overtime and plays at a fast pace? One path I see here is Alabama hitting early threes, stretching it to 10, to 14, to 18, and LSU not having the offensive firepower to counter. Yes, quick turnaround, less than 72 hours. Yes, 117 to 115 in double overtime. But sometimes a high like that carries momentum. And LSU at 2-11 in conference play with 14-2 overall masking it, and allowing almost 39% from three-point range. Ranked 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in three-point defense, that's a dangerous combination against the most three-point dependent team in the SEC. If this becomes a pace game, Alabama is comfortable. If it becomes a half-court game, LSU offense has not been very good and Alabama defense described as fairly solid. I just struggle to build a scenario where LSU keeps it close for 40 minutes given those profiles. Yeah. That's why the lean sticks at Alabama laying the points. Let's see our next game, Syracuse versus North Carolina. Okay, the lean here is under between Syracuse and North Carolina. Let me walk through why. Syracuse 15-12 on the year, 14-13 against the number, coming off a loss to Duke 101-64. North Carolina 20-6 this year, 14-12 against the number, lost to NC State 82-58. So both teams coming off ugly losses, 101-64 and 82-58. Now when I look at the injuries, that's where it shifts. North Carolina without Wilson. North Carolina without Visor. Caleb Wilson injury. Henry Veer banged up. Henry Veer, 7 foot 225. So we're talking about North Carolina without Wilson, without Visor, Henry Veer banged up at 7 foot 225. That changes rebounding depth, that changes interior presence. Statistically, Syracuse shooting 68% from the line in conference play. Do not shoot a ton of threes. North Carolina relies on rebounding. Offensive drop-off without Wilson and Visor. So if this matchup plays out like North Carolina still relying on rebounding but missing Wilson and Visor and with Henry Veer banged up, that offensive drop-off can be real. Syracuse can hang on the glass with North Carolina. That's key. If Syracuse can hang on the glass with North Carolina, and North Carolina relies on rebounding, that neutralizes one of UNC's strengths. Syracuse defense described as poor. UNC perimeter defense described as porous. So you could argue there's points available. But I don't see game getting to 150 points. Projected type score, 74-68. That's 142. That's comfortably under 150. And I keep thinking about the offensive drop-off without Wilson and Visor. North Carolina without Wilson. North Carolina without Visor. Caleb Wilson injury. Henry Veer banged up. 7 foot 225. If UNC perimeter defense described as porous and Syracuse do not shoot a ton of threes, maybe that limits explosive runs. Syracuse shooting 68% from the line in conference play doesn't scream efficiency explosion either. One path I see here is a choppy game, missed free throws at 68% from the line in conference play for Syracuse, UNC trying to manufacture points without Wilson and Visor, relying on rebounding, but Syracuse can hang on the glass with North Carolina. That feels like possessions ending in one shot, maybe some empty trips, maybe some long stretches without buckets. Lost to Duke 101-64. Lost to NC State 82-58. Both teams licking wounds. If this becomes more about tightening up and avoiding another embarrassing scoreline, I just don't see 150 getting threatened. Projected type score, 74-68. That aligns with under. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at under between Syracuse and North Carolina. Guys, it's a big slate. Next game we have Houston versus Arizona. Okay, the lean here is Arizona and the points. Let me walk through why. Houston 23-3 on the year, 11-2 in conference, coming off that loss to Iowa State 70-67. Arizona just snapped a 2-game slide and beat BYU 75-68. So I'm looking at momentum versus response spots right away. If this matchup plays out like Houston comes back angry after losing 70-67 to Iowa State, then yeah, that 23-3 and 11-2 in conference profile shows up. But I can't ignore how Arizona looked against BYU. They snapped a 2-game slide, beat BYU 75-68, and in that game 4 players scored in double figures. That matters to me because it wasn't just one guy cooking. They led by as many as 16 points, and that 16-point lead came with 5 minutes to go in the second half. That's control. Now flip that BYU context. Richie Saunders missing, big loss. A.J. Dibansa scored 35 points. And 35 points was more than half of what BYU scored. So Arizona beat a BYU team where A.J. Dibansa scored 35, more than half of what BYU scored, without Richie Saunders. And Arizona still had 4 players in double figures and led by 16 with 5 minutes to go in the second half. That tells me Arizona can absorb a star performance and still control a game. But this is at Fertitta Center. And Houston at home has been ridiculous. Shut down Cincinnati. Shut down UCF. Shut down Kansas State. Shut down Arizona State. They scored 103 versus Arizona State and gave up 73 in that game. Held West Virginia to 48 points. Beat Texas Tech 69-65, and the Texas Tech game described as toughest home game. So if this matchup plays out like Houston's typical home environment at Fertitta Center where they shut down Cincinnati, shut down UCF, shut down Kansas State, shut down Arizona State, held West Virginia to 48, then it's a grind. But what connects for me is Arizona's conference defensive rankings in conference play. First in 3-point defense. First in 2-point defense. Second in free throw rate allowed. First in rebounding on both ends. That's not just good. That's elite across categories. So Houston strong at forcing turnovers, but Arizona takes care of the ball. That's the collision point. If Houston is strong at forcing turnovers and Arizona takes care of the ball, one path I see here is Houston's primary weapon gets neutralized. And if Arizona is first in 3-point defense and first in 2-point defense and second in free throw rate allowed and first in rebounding on both ends, that means they're contesting everywhere and finishing possessions. So even if Houston scores 103 versus Arizona State and gave up 73 in that game, or held West Virginia to 48, this Arizona profile is different. Value if getting more than a possession with Arizona. Could be a 2 or 3-point game. Taking Arizona and the points. That's the lens I'm looking through. 23-3, 11-2 in conference. Houston at home at Fertitta Center. But Arizona snapping a 2-game slide, beating BYU 75-68, 4 players in double figures, 16-point lead with 5 minutes to go, and ranking first in 3-point defense, first in 2-point defense, second in free throw rate allowed, first in rebounding on both ends. If this is a possession game late, and it could be a 2 or 3-point game, I want the side that takes care of the ball against a team strong at forcing turnovers. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Arizona and the points. Last game of today's video is Iowa State versus BYU. Okay, the lean here is BYU and the 3.5. Let me walk through why. Game starts 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and I always look at these late spots differently. Iowa State laying 3.5 points. And I start stacking their road profile because it jumps out. Iowa State covered 2.5 versus Houston, won by 3. That's impressive. But Iowa State laying 3.5 at Kansas, lost by 21. Iowa State laying 5.5 at Cincinnati, lost outright by 9. Iowa State laying 7.5 at TCU, lost by 7. And they scored 55 at TCU. So if this matchup plays out like Iowa State on the road in conference play, laying numbers and not covering them, that's a pattern. Now zoom out. Iowa State beat Houston by 3. Iowa State 15-0 straight up at home. That's dominance at home. But this is not home. In conference play on the road, lost at Kansas by 21. Lost at Cincinnati by 9. Lost at TCU by 7. Scored 55 at TCU. So when they're laying 3.5 points here, I have to reconcile that with laying 3.5 at Kansas and losing by 21, laying 5.5 at Cincinnati and losing outright by 9, laying 7.5 at TCU and losing by 7. Now BYU lost to Arizona. But they beat Baylor, beat Colorado, beat Utah, beat TCU, struggled against good teams in conference play. BYU needs a big win. Could win outright. That urgency matters to me. One path I see here is Iowa State coming off win of their season. That Houston game where they beat Houston by 3. That could be a letdown spot for Iowa State. Could be a come-out flat spot for Iowa State. And then there's AJ. AJ, one of the best players in college basketball. Arguably best player on the court. Considered best player on the court. If this becomes a late game with the ball in the hands of arguably best player on the court, that's the type of edge that flips a 3.5 number. I keep circling back to the road splits. 15-0 straight up at home versus lost at Kansas by 21, lost at Cincinnati by 9, lost at TCU by 7, scored 55 at TCU. That offensive dip to 55 at TCU is real. And if BYU beat Baylor, beat Colorado, beat Utah, beat TCU, even while struggling against good teams in conference play, this feels like a spot where they need a big win. Letdown spot for Iowa State. Come out flat spot for Iowa State. Iowa State coming off win of their season. BYU spot. Take the points. Want the 3.5. Would not be surprised if BYU wins outright. If this matchup plays out like Iowa State's conference road profile and BYU plays with urgency behind arguably best player on the court, I see a one-possession game, maybe even BYU winning outright. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at BYU and the 3.5. Alright, that wraps it up for all 10 matchups on February 21st. Again, this is analysis and opinion only, nothing guaranteed, just me working through how these games might unfold if the spots, the matchups, and the numbers connect the way they're shaping up on paper. We're at that point in the season where urgency matters, rotations tighten, and little edges decide everything. I'm really curious how you're seeing this board tonight, so drop a Z in the comments and tell me which game you're circling or where you think I might be off. I read all of it. More full slate breakdowns coming soon, same raw format, same thinking out loud style, same deep dives. Let's keep building.